Hi everybody, welcome to our live stream. Today we're in Nelson and we're going to be stripping this section of weatherboard. I was here last night and Andy here said I could come back and strip a bit more. So George is spraying up some surface hairproof about a square metre odd. First thing we've got to do is take off what's on top of all the timber, which is what you'd imagine we'll be doing. So this first layer of paint is acrylic, which we find goes quite rubbery. And we'll find that it will absorb the stripper very, very quickly. Now, stripper being thin, you'll see that it absorbs very quickly. If you move to the top there, you'll see, you can just keep on. So being thin, once it absorbs in, it will generally need another coat to back it up. You'll see that it's thirsty there. Now often when we come and look at projects, we find that there's all sorts of different paints on. There's never just one type of paint. Mostly what we find is lead at the bottom, coated by enamel, coated by acrylic on top. And they're all fighting against each other, and there's often different levels of repairs and part strips from the past, and you find all sorts of things. And we'll deal with all those. It's a little bit like musical chairs where someone along the way gets the job to take off all the paints. Now Arthur, can I have a look at some of these bubbles over here? Now, if George puts more stripper on top of these bubbles, he's just going to be throwing the product away. And so when you get paint that breaks away from the layers underneath, we need to get rid of those so that new stripper can get access to the layers underneath. So, so the first two light coats have done their job. And what George is going to do now is quickly drag off those acrylic layers. Go the other way, George. Now most people have seen a limbayed scraper, but most people won't have seen the long handled version. The extra length of handle means you don't have to actually put much pressure on the blade to do the job. George is not trying to take off the hard paint underneath. If you start making it into flakes and chips and dust, you'll start spreading that round and you're likely to have lead going where it's not supposed to be. And you can see as we go here that there's paint that's gone right to the wood, and that's where past painters have sanded back little patches and got flaky bits off. So that's most of the acrylic gone. Under those edges.
We have a question from Daryl Clark.
Hi Daryl.
How many litres of stripper will you use for this section today?
The sample I did last night, it came out to using a litre of stripper will strip about 2 square metres of surface, and which is pretty good. When you look at your normal conventional strippers out there, when they're talking about 0.4 square metres per application, this is going many times the distance. So now we're on with more stripper. This time we're getting at the enamel paint, and we're also got access now to the lead. Lead's a major thing in New Zealand. We're continually poisoning ourselves with lead dust. We think sanding is a more eco way of doing things, but all you're doing is grinding up lead to spread around, and it's just not good. Even your heat guns, they're vaporizing the lead. This system is wet, so there's no lead dust, and it's all controlled. You can see the sheeting on the ground. Have a look at that, Arthur. So it's easily contained. So we say it's a controlled mess, but basically we're going to be able to get all this paint off and not have any of that go into the ground. So with our stripper we do put a few applications on, but each application's thin, and so you're not going through the sort of product you might think you are. It's better to use a few thin coats and get the job done than put a great big thick dollop of gel on and find that it bubbles away, and now you've got to throw it all away. So every project we do, it's different. Like this one has got the acrylic, and then it's got enamel. You can see up here, these are probably enamel bubbles, both acrylic and enamel bubble, but these layers down here are the lead, and lead won't bubble. It looks like it's doing nothing, but it actually is turning into a paste. So while we give that a couple of minutes to soak, one of the things is that allow the product to do its job. If it needs 5 minutes, then give it 5 minutes. Now what I'm going to do is come over and show you some other weatherboards. This is one of our show displays. This top area, this is got many types here. We've got enamel and lead and creosote and all sorts of things, and there's a lot of thickness through here, and that came up. And what we've got here is what I call a clean, dry, absorbent surface, and that's what makes new paint work. When you keep putting paint over top of paint, and it's just a recipe for disaster. We go to the jobs every week that were only painted a year before professionally, and people are wondering why, after paying all that money, it's actually blistering. This one down here is your, again, a whole lot of different layers. You can see there's many layers there. And then down here we've got Cedar. It's ideal for stripping cedar surfaces. You've got your typical wood stains. A lot of people with their cedar want the nice wood stain look, which looks good, but people often aren't told you've got to do certain 12-18 months maintenance, and so once the surface fails, it's got to come off. And then at the bottom here we've got that textured cement board, and that is how would you normally strip that? You can't sand this. It's got all this graining that's put into the cement board, and you can't sand it off or anything. And so what we do is we use our brushes. So you put the stripper on the paint, give it its time, keeping it wet, and then we literally brush it off. And one day we'll have a house where we can show you one. How are we going, George?
Very good. As soon as he take up his bubbles head, so. This board's got a bit of a bevel on the edge, and this is good for just following the line of that.
Can I have a look at this here, Arthur? This bevel that George is talking about on this edge here, that's good to have, because when you put your new paint on, this edge is usually highly stressed as the paint expands and contracts. So if it's a razor edge there, you're likely to have the paint split. And by having a bit of an arris on there, it helps the paint not crack. Now, I was going to grab a couple of pictures. This blade that George is using is what we call a modified broad knife. It's an American blade from the Hyde Tool Company. Very, very good tools there. And what we've done is we've put a saw edge into it, down this edge here, and it allows us to cut into areas where there are build-ups. When you fill up all these natural draining areas, it's a good way of getting moisture where it shouldn't be. I mean, moisture comes down, the tension's broken and then it flows off. When you fill it all up and then paint it, you're actually, it's a place where moisture will go in and sit. Now, up here, so you can see where
It's ready now.
that's all been splitting. Is that ready to go, is it, George?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Back to the action. I've been selling these products for over 35 years and I still do not get bored watching this. You'll find that the paint has got different thicknesses. Typically, under the edges, it's thicker. When you're painting, you generally, as you take the paintbrush out of the can, the first place you put it is in there. It's out of the can, and boof boof into these parts. So these are usually thicker than the parts here. And also these parts here get more weathering as rain comes down over time. There's more and more wear and tear at that bottom parts. So we'll be putting on some more strip. Amy's just written in about how it's a little bit slow going at the start, but once she gets the hang, it's quick and easy. And that is a very, very normal comment we get when we meet people at home shows who have been using the system. We always say, give yourself a bit of time to get the hang of it. Doesn't take long. Usually in your first couple, 3 hours, we say to people, do small test patches to get the timing right. The next house we go to, the method will be the same but slightly different. There'll be different paint combinations, the different amount of sun that's been smashing into it, being on the sides of the house. The bruise of the different paints changed from area to area. Originally, the old houses, that paint was all made on site. So it's depending on how much lead they were pouring into it and those sorts of factors. Now, we're getting closer here. I just want to kill a couple of minutes so we don't rush the stripper. Now, one of the two, before I talk about that, more comment about what Amy's just said too, and that is the reason we're doing live streams is people often see us at home shows and they see us do our little samples and it all looks too good to be true. And the thing about a live stream is this is live, this is real, there's no editing going on, this is This is George's first patch. I did this patch here last night. This is George's first go at this patch. So it's as real as you can get. Now, I showed this on Sunday, and I'll show it again because this is relevant with the fact that we're doing weatherboards. But this thing I got that looks like a bit of cardboard or wallpaper, it's actually paint from, where was it? It was in Oamaru, that's right. And it was sitting there on someone's house, and it had basically someone had heat gunned, you can see on the picture here, these scorch marks, or here, someone had heat gunned or blowtorched, and they'd actually damaged the layer of lead. The lead looks often like it's almost like cake icing where it's been smoothed out over, and the lead had been damaged, and so when the acrylic paint was then put on top, the actual paint just dragged it off. It actually ballooned up. When I was there, I just trailed this off, and it just literally dragged as the paint expands and contracts, which is what acrylic's supposed to do. As it contracted, it just snaps the paint and drags it off. And on the back of this, you can see that's lead, and it just took it straight off. And it could, I mean, acrylic paint's pretty tough, and that's what it left on the surface. So she wasn't very happy, and so I advise people to keep away from the heat guns. One, they bring out vapors from the paint itself, and so you're actually breathing up all that vapor, again lead, and in case you're bringing out oil also, because this timber is, I think it's Rimu, Totra is by far the worst, but what happens is oil that's natural in the timber comes to the surface when you're heating it or you're sanding it, and then when your new paint goes on, unless you've got some magic primer, you're looking for trouble. Now let's get rid of these. Now, I'm just waiting a bit longer for that. I want to talk a bit about masking. So you'll see along the bottom here, we've got this masking plastic. It's got a green bit of tape along the top edge. And this is our 2.4 meter wide pre-taped masking film. And it comes on these rolls. And they're brilliant. If you were, say, stripping this window and not doing the weatherboards, you would put this wide one across there. Being 2.4 meters wide, it'll drop to the ground and go on there, and everything will be contained, and you won't damage your weatherboard. But of course, when you're doing the side, you don't need plastic going halfway around the wall, so we have a narrower one to do that one. That one's half a meter wide, and that'll come out well. And I'll show you over here. On our website, cooperstripclub.com, you will see a tutorial of this happening. And so this is our quick live stream tutorial. And let's get myself a bit of tape. So you've now got a stripping surface that if I was stripping the window, I can strip without wrecking my weatherboards. You've always got to be wiping bits of surplus off, like the risk area is the stripper getting underneath the tape from there, so you sometimes get a few little bits of bleeding underneath, but if you've rubbed that down really firmly, and as you spray, make sure you just wipe off as you go. That gives you a pretty good result. And also, the reason I've masked up here is we've got powder coating. These inserted windows, you've got white powder coat on top of the aluminium, and our stripper loves powder coating. It'll strip that off. If your windows are anodized aluminium, then it won't touch it. So that's our masking solution. It works really well. So where are we at to here, George?
We're ready.
Ready. Now before he does that, see how the paint hasn't blistered. It's all just looks like, almost in some cases, like it hasn't done anything. We seem to think stripper should always have bubbles, but different paints do different things, and lead paint turns into like toothpaste. Okay, so go for it, George. Often people ask us how much do you do at a time. Now I always start with the small sample like I did last night, and that gives you the answers to those sort of questions. If you're doing too much, it'll be getting out of control and it won't be any fun. You'll be sort of rushing to have it all happen, and so you just find a size of area. This is, like I say, it's around about the 1 square metre, and if you find this is fine, or you think you could do more, then you do say 2 square metres. If you at any point you find this doing too much, you'll be wasting product and you won't be enjoying the process. So you just back it off a little bit. So we've just got a few little spots to go here. I don't know if we've got to actually spray the entire surface this time, George.
Fair enough. We're scrubbing the grip pad soon, so.
So this won't be grip pad yet. Smells it like that. So we've just got a question come in about how much to do a 15 by 7.5 metre house. I'm not too sure what 15 times 7.5 is my brain. If it was sort of 10 by 10, that's around 100 square metres surface times a couple of metres high is so it's 10, it's 40, 80 odd square metres. So just pretending this is about 80 square metres of weatherboard. In the case of this house, we're getting about 2 square metres per litre. So your 81 would be about 40 odd litres to do it, which is pretty normal. 40 to 80 litres is pretty typical for weatherboards. It just really depends on house size and and of course what paint's on there. The thicker the lead. So what we'll do is we'll talk afterwards about getting some photographs of it. Now I'll talk more about painting afterwards. George has got a phase to come up soon where it's the no sanding part of the system. So if you can hang in there, we'll show you that very shortly. Now, can we see this here?
Maybe we should hold it
Over
against
there?
the wall.
Yep. So this is our 3-step. So part 1, which is we're still on, that's always the one you've really got to get right, and that is stripping what's on the surface. So it's stripper on, waiting for it to reach the surface, where in this case we've got this, you keep the surface wet with stripper, and then if it gets large blisters, which it did, you remove them and then put more stripper on if needed, which it has been. And that's quite normal for weatherboards. So we've been sort of going around in circles here, getting down to the surface, and pretty soon we're going to be moving into this part 2, which is the stripping what's in the surface, which we're sort of partly doing right now. So these first 2 parts are both coloured red to go with the red stripper, and then the no sanding part of the system is this part 3, which I'll talk about more later. So soft those bits now, George.
That's off.
Let's blast those last chunky bits off. We're often asked, do we have to get it this clean? And I say, well, we're actually going to get it cleaner than this. The more paint you leave on, the more trouble you're going to have with future paint. Because when the old lead paint's broken down, it's just going to cause problems for your new paint, which is probably going to be acrylic.
And here we've just got something protruding out of the boards, so I'm just having to work around it a bit.
Let me just grab another one.
Ah, yes. Okay.
George is still learning. He's only got 21 years experience of this. He's a bit slow when he was born, but it's coming along well.
And now it's time to give it a scrub.
So now we're moving into the part 2, the stripping what's in the surface. This is really one of the really key to the system, and that's getting into the grain. So you do your square metre before breakfast, and then that's it for the day, and you do that for a month or 2 and your house is done. If you've ever had a price to strip a house, the telephone numbers. No, you start scrubbing that, George. I'll explain that. This is an English product, a little bit like a Scotch Brite. This one's an English version. It's a little bit coarser. So it's like a nylon pad with a grit that's been embedded into it. That's why we call it a grit embedded pad. And so we're giving it now a wet scrub. So everything's damp. We don't want to scrub it dry. So you see George is giving it the odd puff. You'll look at this wood afterwards and want to remove it and make furniture out of it because it'll be that good. I have had people who have reclad a house for the timber they've taken off. Most weatherboard houses we see are variations of this method. It's pretty much the same each time, just with little differences depending on what paint you find. So hopefully this will be a good surprise for Andy when he gets home. I'd like to say he has no idea about it, but he has given us his permission. So this is the same method as if you were doing your windows, all the same thing. Now when you're doing outside jobs like this, we don't use our steel wool. Our packs you'll see have steel wool in them. The steel wool is used for scrubbing the stripper if you're doing an inside job, like your doors, the skirtings, that sort of thing, windows inside. When you're doing outside projects, like the weatherboards, windows, cars, anything like that, you use these pads. If you get bits of metal caught in the wood, you're just going to get little rust dots coming through your new paint. As I said before, if we were doing textured grain, you would be using brushes instead of the pads. You just pick the right tools for the job. Question we often get is, can you clean the pads? You can to some extent. What I do is I get a jar, like an old gherkin jar or something, and put some solvent in the jar, and you basically, while the pad is still wet and mushy, just put them in so they can soak overnight, and then you get yourself a sort of high pressure on the end of a hose and give them a squirt out. Each time you go around using them that way, the pad will have less and less grit in it. This is nearing the end of the part 2. So as they say, devil's in the detail. It's all these little bits you want to get into. That's looking good, George. Now, do we give it a quick wipe down? There's a rag. So just give it a quick wipe over to get rid of any surface goo, and then we're going to move on to part 3, the final part. Okay, George, show them the flashing. Now, for the eagle-eyed person out there, you'll notice the colour of the liquid's changed. We've got, this is our flusher, and this is the last part. And again, you'll notice that the wood's as clean, and often people think this is more than is needed. But if you want the risk of having to paint your house another time when you get paint failure, let's just do it right. Let's get all the paint out of the grain that's able to get out, so that the new paint will succeed. So this flusher is a paraffin-based spirit, and it's not neutralizing anything. This is not a neutralizer. It is a rinse, and we're rinsing away residues of paint. We're rinsing away residues of stripper, and we're going to leave the wood clean, dry, and absorbent. Will be a bit of a shame to paint over it, but there you are. And it's quite amazing how clean it comes up. So we usually say spray, scrub, spray, wipe. And this is your no sanding part. This is the insurance policy against having the paint succeed, or insurance against failure. Sounds better. We use this rinse, this paraffin-based spirit. It gives you more scrubbing time than if you were using thinners or something like that, and you don't have the odour. It's a far more pleasant product to work with.
George, can you show the rag to the camera to see that extra residue coming off? Thank you.
So I like to roll my rag as I work, so I don't re-smear on residues.
That's right, yeah, that's an important point. As you're going, just in your mind, you're removing residues, not spreading it around. You can leave this area dry through, George. Here's your rag. Where do you live, Vivian? I'm going to Tauranga this weekend. So hopefully you're on the way. Wow. That looks pretty done, George.
It does, doesn't it?
Now you see this rag around the blade? This is a pretty cool trick. You just move into those parts.
Can you show that again, George?
Sure. Get your blade, get your rag, strap it over it, and then you insert it into the groove and you just drag. And that just pulls out all that gunk.
That little storage that we've put into it, it holds onto the rag really well. And generally at this point when we do a home demo, we would get our viewer to give it a stroke and say, generally we get words like smooth as a baby's bottom and all that. But what we've got here, guys, is a clean, dry, absorbent surface. We've got now full access to anything that might be hiding under there. But this has come up clean as. Now, to demonstrate this absorption, you can see where we've done the stripping, that's the solvent, the rinse still in the surface. You can see at the top over there, it's starting to dry out, and within the next half hour, that will have all evaporated out, and it will look like this piece over here I did last night. And so as soon as it's dry, it's ready for painting. And so the key, the absolute key that I always rave on about is what you want is a clean, dry, absorbent surface. And that's what you get here. So, thank you for watching. And as again we say, George, come over here, say good day. If you, what do we say? Are you looking for a stripper?
A stripper that really gets it off?
Coopers.
A stripper that gets it off
Every time.